Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor. I'm your host, Steve Ward. On the High Strangeness Factor, while we explore all aspects of the unexplained, we look with a special emphasis for patterns and underlying connections, past and present, that may link what appear to be different areas of the paranormal. John Keel, the author of the Mothman Prophecies, saw early on the interconnectedness of all paranormal activity, such as UFOs, cryptids, and ghostly activity. Uh, Very quickly, I need to correct something I said last episode. My great guest was Charles Cox, paranormal investigator. I said in the opening that he was a member of Michigan MUFON. Well, in fact, he's not a member. He attends regularly, is a great supporter of the organization, and has even spoken there. But to dot every I and cross every T, I just wanted to make that correction. And now, without any further ado, I want to introduce my great guests and friends, by the way. Tonya Madia is an author, Reiki master, medium, yoga teacher, and massage therapist. Through her experiences, she has come to the conclusion that we all possess natural intuitive abilities, and much of her time is spent helping others to develop these life enhancing skills. Her investigations cover everything from residences and cemeteries to businesses. She is the author of Living the Intuitive Life, Cultivating Extraordinary Awareness, published by Visionary Living. She offers workshops on developing intuition, yoga, meditation, and dream work. And she also does private readings. Joey Madia is a screenwriter, playwright, novelist, actor, and director. His screenplay, The Man at the Foot of the Bed, is based on a true story. The Medias will be launching a paranormal audio drama this summer that you'll be able to find on the Roads Beyond the Known webpage. And I'm happy to say that I will be a consultant on that. Now, also, among many things today, we'll be talking about their great book, Watch Out for the Hallway, which is a 2-year investigation into a haunted library in North Carolina. Joey and Tanya, welcome to the High Strangers Factor.
Thank you. It's
Thank you,
awesome to
Steve.
be here.
Well, isn't it kind of cool? It's been, what, about 10 years since we've
It
known
is.
each other?
Yeah, it'll be
Yep.
10 years it's 10 years at the end of this year. Yeah.
Well, my first really clear memory, of course, we met at the Mothman Festival. Is that right? The first time, I think.
That is really, I think
Well, see,
actually, Steve,
what I remember is you guys telling me your story, the encounter you had on Route 62 at a Mothman Festival, and I remember, of course, later on we met during a November event that we got to know each other quite a bit better. But anyway, it's been 10 years, so my memory could be a little clearer. What's your memory?
I think that so we had this experience that of course we're going to talk
Yes.
about this hour, and then through a sequence of investigators, the Frick brothers, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, you were nice enough to come to Point Pleasant, and we traced our steps and
Right.
explained to you what happened, what we saw, when, what was going on, and it's been a terrific 10 years of friendship and fellowship since then.
See, I remember a bright sunny day. We're standing in the midst of the Mothman Festival, which I've talked about before, and people are going to hear me talk about it over and over again. As we these episodes proceed. It takes place the third weekend in September every year, and is a great, I don't know, sort of a laboratory of the paranormal. All the things that happen there in the Ohio Valley. But I remember you telling me your story the first time. I'd been introduced by John and Tim Frick, of course, the
Yep.
the
Yep.
infamous Frick brothers, who are an integral part of the Mothman Festival, portray the Men in Black by day and fly the Mothman by night. But so they're pretty busy. But yeah, so why don't you tell us about how it's a great story about how you got connected with Point Pleasant, and you had some interesting experiences that led to all kinds of things. A very sort of a strange and serendipitous event all rolled into one. So just roll with it. Just tell us how you got to Point Pleasant.
So Joey and I had seen the movie The Mothman Prophecies in probably 2005, 2006. It was shortly before we moved to West Virginia in any event. And we loved the movie. We thought it was great. Um, but when we got to West Virginia, I forget how I found out. I was on the internet or something, but I found out that Point Pleasant was only a few hours away from where we were living. And not only that, they had a Mothman museum. So I was all excited, and Joey not so much. So it it took me a couple of years actually to convince him. So that was 2007 when we moved to West Virginia. We actually didn't get out to Point Pleasant until 2009.
But by the way, can I interrupt here just a second? I should say that the Mothman Museum is phenomenally well done. This is
Yes.
not a uh, this is not just a halfway effort to put up something to cash in on the tourist trade. They've done a phenomenal job of collecting the history and the folklore of the area and the Mothman. And they even the merchandise they sell there is top quality too. Jeff Wamsley is the curator of the Mothman Museum and also the co-founder of the festival. I just wanted to let people know that you've got to get down to Point Pleasant, see the statue, and see the museum. But anyway, go ahead, Tanya.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The museum is extremely well done, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. Joey just couldn't at the time couldn't conceive why he'd drive through a little over 3 hours because he just didn't know what was there, right? So I finally convinced him, and in I believe August of 2009, we went for a weekend trip. And so when we first got to Point Pleasant, Steve, you know what a charming, nostalgic town it is. It's the old style, like Main Street. It was really like taking a step back in time, and we were really engaged with the whole town. We went into the Mothman Museum, we went into some of the shops, and we had gone into a store that's no longer there, and I'm sure you remember the Point, which
Yes.
was run by a gentleman by the name of Bob.
Yes.
So while we were in the Point, we were telling Bob, it was our first time there. We were going to, explore the area and whatnot. And he drew us a map of the TNT area, which is just north of the downtown area. And as you know, out Route 62. So he said to Joey and I, if you see anything or if anything unusual happens, be sure to come back and let me know. So we certainly agreed to do that, and we purchased because he had informed us that he thought that the TNT grounds, which is now the McClintock Wildlife Preserve, that all of that was Indian burial ground. So we wanted to take a token, to sort of recognize and respect that. So we purchased some sage, a smudge stick from him. And I know what time it was when we left because we later consulted the receipt. And so we purchased that at 2:30 in the afternoon. And we left his store. We drove out to the TNT area, which, again, as you know, is no more than not even 15 minutes, right, from downtown Point Pleasant.
Right.
So we get out there. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's a beautiful area. And yet we feel strange. We feel like we're being watched. We feel a little bit uneasy. We're quite uncomfortable. We explore the area for maybe 10 minutes. We couldn't have been there for more than 10 minutes
No,
because,
it was more than just I've been there, and as you know, I'm not terribly intuitive or pick up any kind of vibration, but I can say that it is just visually, it's kind of a creepy area,
yeah.
and of course it gets creepier at night. But there was a different a feeling there. I mean, it was something just beyond the physical characteristics.
It was beyond the physical characteristics because at that time it didn't particularly look creepy to us. I mean, there was wildlife there. It was August, so everything was in bloom. There was just something more about the feeling. It just felt off.
Okay.
And like I said, we really felt like we were being watched. And as you know, there are these igloos out there, but for those who are listening who don't know what that is, they're old cement domes that were used to store munitions during World War II. And so they sort of look like cement igloos. They used to be covered by earth, but now they're just completely exposed and empty. And those are the sort of the attraction for the folks who go out to the wildlife preserve is that they like to go inside and explore these igloos, because apparently a lot of strange things happen, as we were to later find. But at that time, we didn't know anything about it other than that we should go and explore it. So we went inside a couple of the igloos, we left our sage, and we decided that that was enough and we were going to head back into town. So like I said, we were there for all of about 10 minutes. As we were driving back toward town, Joey and I both looked at each other and we were saying, didn't that kind of feel, weird? Wasn't that kind of creepy out there? And just as we were talking about that, just ahead of us in the road, a figure leaped across the road in a split second. This blackish grayish figure in a single bound leapt from one side of the road to the other and just vanished into thin air.
In this area, this road is a 2-lane all the way north out of Point Pleasant into the toward the T&T area, Potter's Creek Road, and there isn't too much around there. I mean, there's a few houses here and there and cornfields and so forth, and you can see the stacks from the power plant across the river off in the distance, but there isn't a heck of a lot out there.
Exactly. There really isn't a lot. At the time that we saw this figure, Joey and I both recall there being a cornfield on either side. That'll come into play in a minute. But okay. So we looked at each other in exactly the same moment. We said, "Did you just see that?" Now, it was so fast that had we not done that, we probably both would have dismissed it because it was so quick. And so we both said, "Yeah, well, what did you see?" And we decided that we weren't going to describe to each other what we saw right then. We decided we'd wait until we got back into town and we were going to draw a sketch, each of us.
And that's a really great idea. And most people won't do that. You're just, you want to just blab back and forth what you just saw.
Yeah, and in retrospect, I can't remember. Joey, do you remember why we decided to draw instead of discuss it?
No, I having told this story now so many times and over 10 years to so many people, I really think it was kind of sort of guided to do it that way, to give it a legitimacy, because it was not something that we would ever, I wish I could say, well, as seasoned paranormal investigators, we certainly weren't at the time. That was the start of our journey. So it was just an intuitive idea to go, let's do it this way.
It was really inspired because it gives it a very unusual experience more credibility.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's why it was guided, because it seems, and I'd love to talk about this over the course of the hour, it seems like very much we were guided to Point Pleasant, and it's opened up so much this experience for us over 10 years that I think that there's a whole design to it.
And so then, tell us about and also, did you have, when you saw this thing, were there any feelings at that point in time? Any intuition? Any beyond just seeing it visually?
No, just sort of what in the world was that? Like, what could have possibly? To me, the way that it moved, it wasn't shaped and it didn't look anything like an animal, but it moved with the grace of a deer. The way, like, if you've ever seen a deer sort of glide across the air when it leaps, that was the fluidity of the movement. Although it was kind of just shaped like a humanoid, bipedal sort of looking figure. But anyway, it vanished on the side of the road. We decided, well, Bob wanted to hear if we saw anything weird. This is pretty weird. So we decided to go back and share it with Bob. When we got back to the store, it was closed and it was locked, and we couldn't figure out why, because as far as we knew, we had only been gone maybe 45 minutes. And we looked, and it was well past closing time for the store. So it was well past whatever time. It was like after 4. So we had about 45 minutes of missing time that we couldn't account for.
And that's interesting in itself, because normally we connect missing time with a strange light in the sky or some kind of unknown craft we can't determine. This, I guess we would call this a cryptid, although you didn't see any arms or legs, or was sort of the impression of having arms and legs?
It looked to me, Steve, how I've always described it is, if a man in a neoprene wetsuit was fired out of a cannon with his arms at his side so that he was as aerodynamic as possible. That's what it looked like to me. So no wings, nothing like that. People, of course, have asked us, it was Point Pleasant. They're like, hey, did you think you saw the Mothman? I would say absolutely not, although we don't know with certainty. But I would say it was, we don't know
We don't
what
know.
it was. An interdimensional being. That's how we describe it. An
And I want you to keep. I know that you mentioned interdimensional beings in this the haunted library. I want to follow that also. And Tonya, did you see pretty much the same thing? I mean, was it did it look like it's if it had arms, they were down to the side where you didn't really see anything?
Yeah, I didn't really see anything that resembled arms or
Okay.
wings. And like I say, it was just so quick. It kind of had the general outline of a humanoid type looking figure, but it was just so quick. It was like a grayish black. Um, what was interesting too, though, is when we later went back to where we saw the figure, there was only one cornfield. We both distinctly remember two. And Joey remembered there being a gas station, a sort of vintage style gas station that wasn't there at all. It just wasn't there. So
And did you see it?
I did not. I did
Okay.
not recall seeing the gas
All right.
station. But I did definitely, because to me, in my memory, the figure emerged from one side of the road from the edge of the corn, and sort of landed on the edge on the other side of the road at the edge of the cornfield where it vanished. It didn't go into the cornfield, it just vanished into thin air.
right, and
And
I agree with that.
and it didn't
Right,
seem to
and
come out of the cornfield on the other side, or
it
could you tell?
seemed it seemed to, but there's actually a house
Oh, okay.
where that cornfield was supposed to be, and that house has been there for a good while.
Yeah, so there
Yeah.
was, I mean, not, I don't mean to say in reality, but certainly in this reality, there was only one cornfield. So we have no explanation for what we were seeing in that moment.
Right. And in the subsequent months, as we met with different investigators, the Frick brothers, Rosemary, yourself, we came to see that there was not only the 45 minutes of missing time, but there was space-time distortion. So what buildings were there as opposed to what buildings weren't there, and also the length of time that we traveled. We felt like we were on that road much longer than we were returning. So it was a strange, sort of portally, time warpy thing that we drove into.
That's really a fascinating experience all around.
Yeah.
And but that was your introduction. Now you through Bob. You mentioned Bob. He was sort of a centerpiece. I know that everybody came to Bob to tell them about their experiences, and he would take people out to the TNT area at night with no flashlights, with nothing, and he would really give them an experience. So, and that's where you met John and Tim Frick, right? I mean,
Yes.
through him.
Yeah. So Bob handed us their card. Again, this was in August, and then I called them and left a message. And within a few weeks, we were exiting a Walmart. It kind of gotten out of our head, as sometimes these experiences do, because Tanya and I have both been experiencers of hauntings and strange occurrences and things like that for a long time. So it was just another in a line of experiences. But John called us and said, your story sounds really interesting, and we're going to be in Point Pleasant in November. Would you like to meet us? And so we did that, and that's really where the story for us has really grown from that time.
Oh, that's okay. That's really cool. Was that the November I was there, or was that a different November?
I we all seem to misremember it, which
Right.
is
I think
that's the
it seems to
mystique
me.
of Point Pleasant.
It seems to
That's
me
the
that must have been another November because I think that your friendship was established before that. But
Oh, okay. See,
but
so I want to claim you much earlier, and I
okay.
think that's what's going on. So we're actually coming up on about 9 years that we've
So
known.
we're having a cornfield moment here. We're
We
remembering the
are.
Yeah, we
cornfield
are in
differently.
some way
We are.
typical Point Pleasant. I don't know if people watch Oak Island, Curse of Oak Island,
Yes.
as we have for many years, they always go, well, that's Oak Island, and I always think of, well, that's Point Pleasant. it has that way.
Although now I'm going to be curious, Steve, because I do have photos from our first meeting when we took you out to the cornfield when we
Yes.
were all standing. So I'm going to check the timestamp on
Well,
those.
I
I'm
remember
curious.
I remember that the Frick saying, "Oh, Joey and Tonya are going to join us," and I thought, "Oh, that's cool." I knew who you guys were. I'm sure that we had that discussion at a previous Mothman festival. Uh,
Yeah.
Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and the Fricks had been the day before had been to the Gray Barker archive. Of course, Gray Barker, the great
Yes.
UFO
Yeah.
researcher in
I do remember
Clarksville.
that.
Okay,
Yes.
so.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I guess you came into the picture about a year later, or 13 months later.
But
Yeah.
but here's something else I remember about that. We went back to that same spot, and it
Yep.
seemed to me at the time, Rosemary and you, Joey, had sort of a intuition that if you looked off in the direction where this thing was heading, that you kind of sensed some kind of an energy or a spot or something, very undefined, but it almost seemed like there was for lack of a better word, a portal or something there.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's actually the word that we used, and the word that I do use, and our journey the past 10 years um, has really centered around these portals. Tanya and I both seem to be sensitive to them. We wind up in living and visiting in places where there are portals. And again, that's part of that whole mystique too. But it made sense because it's in line with the power plant, and you have the rivers there, and all these things that we've learned about geography and energy, and how manufactured energy, electrical plants and all sort of interact with natural geography to
Right.
create these energy spots. But that was really the start of all of that. Yeah.
And you got the confluence of the two rivers there, the Ohio
Yeah,
and the
which is
Kanawha.
huge. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely huge. Yep.
Um, and you mentioned portals. Let's see. The way I do these interviews, I jump all over the place, but I don't want to wait too long to get into the library. We can jump back and forth to earlier events, but you mentioned two things: interdimensionals and portals, and both those things seem to connect to this the library. Uh, Tell us about the web library, how where you were living and how you first got in contact. You know what? There's something else I want to do first. Just very as briefly, you guys are both experiencers, and I'm not sure if I envy you or not because some of your experiences have been a little strange, a little creepy. I'm not much of an experiencer, as you know, but you both experienced the paranormal and it had strange events happen separately, and when you were single and didn't know each other, and also together. Just give us a little bit of an idea of what that was like for you guys, so we know your background.
Sure. So from the time I was little, I remember, different kinds of experiences. Of course, when you're really little, you just don't know what to make of it. But I would hear things. I would just kind of get a sense of things, know things. Because my grandmother was a psychic medium and was always bringing the Ouija board over to our house. She did automatic writing. I was pretty familiar with metaphysical concepts. So, and definitely familiar with the idea of ghosts. So I always felt like there were ghosts all around me, but I didn't really see them. I more heard them. Things would move around.
And it was something very comfortable for your grandmother.
It was very comfortable for my grandmother. For me, on the other hand, it really wasn't. Not until I was much older. Now I'm completely comfortable with it, but as a child, even into adulthood, for me, I was really kind of afraid of all of it. Didn't know what to make of it, and pretty much everywhere I lived, there were experiences, mainly haunting type experiences. So yeah, that was basically it for me. Just I say it like it's so normal, right? But um, you know, just all your typical haunting stuff. Things would move, voices, doors opening and closing,
And
cold spots, all that stuff.
as a child, it was kind of creepy. You processed it okay, or
I was really afraid of it
okay.
as a child. I mean, I probably until I was like 10 years old and my parents absolutely wouldn't let me do it anymore. I was always trying to get in my parents' bed at night because I would hear footsteps almost every night, footsteps walking around the house. I'd hear these footsteps walking into my room. On
Oh
a
man.
few occasions, like my bed would sink down as if somebody was there, but nobody was there. And my dog would bark. We had dogs all the time as a kid, and the dogs would always be barking. And of course, there was nothing there. My parents, they didn't really. My mom, she was a little bit more open to it. My dad, to this day, is pretty skeptical about all of it. So they didn't really believe that I was experiencing anything. And by the time I was 9 or 10, they were like, "That's it, no more. You're too old for this."
Yeah, I don't think I never really experienced anything, but that didn't keep me from when I got the room upstairs from sleeping under the covers, those protective magical covers with a
Yes,
little air hole so I could breathe.
that's right.
I think I did that till I was about 27. But anyway, uh,
Yeah.
Joey, what about you? How did you have any kind of
So
strange experiences as you were young, when you were young?
I'll tell you, Steve. Plenty of strange experiences, but nothing paranormal. But no, seriously. So
Mhm.
until the time I was about 30, I only had a single experience. And I was 16 years old, but I think it prepared me for everything to come from my 30s up until now. I just turned 50, so the last 20 years. And when I was in high school, we had a group, we did theater and the arts together, and we spent a lot of time in the wing of that building. And these two girls, a little younger than us, had brought in a Ouija board. And it was very, looking back on it and having read Rosemary Ellen Guiley's books on the Ouija and really studying it, I realized that it was a textbook sort of case. So a very pleasant young girl comes through for these two girls, and she's colonial era, and isn't this wonderful? And it's terrific. And then several days into the experience as they're doing it, then she says, actually, I was murdered, I was drowned, and this man was chasing me. And then it comes along a few days later, it's actually the murderer that's coming through. And he's beginning to really affect and sort of terrorize these two girls. So just intuitively, a Ouija board was something that my aunt had, that on holidays we would go up in their attic and we would play with it, like we'd spell out dirty words and things like that. My cousins and I, yeah, we had no idea what this thing was. But so now we're starting to get an understanding of it. And it's like, girls, why don't you just, don't do it anymore. Whatever's going on, it's not fun anymore. Well, they start to not come to school for several days. Well, word gets through the grapevine that they're kind of holed up in one of the girls' basements, like using this Ouija board, and this thing is terrorizing them. So we say, my buddy Lou and I, a couple of, Italian Americans, Roman Catholics, never, don't believe in any of this stuff, really. We say, well, we're going to come over and take care of it. So word spreads, and there's maybe a couple dozen and a half kids down in this basement. There's candles lit at the perimeter of all that. And they start up the Ouija board, and this guy thing is being kind of threatening or whatever. And out of nowhere, I just say, if you're so powerful, why don't you do something to us? Like that. And Steve, not only did it feel like my heart stopped, but the world stopped revolving on its axis for just a split second, just enough for me to feel that there are things out there that if they wanted to show you how powerful they are, they absolutely could. And so I was growing up at the Jersey Shore, and I did, and I have a very healthy respect for the ocean because I've been in the ocean in a small sailboat in a very big storm and didn't know if I was going to live. That Ouija board experience gave me that same kind of relationship with the paranormal. This is not something to play with. And so really, it was another 14 years before Tonya and I got married that I really became what you would call a steady experiencer.
And as I recall in the book, Watch Out for the Hallway, which we'll get into in a few moments, uh, your psychic ability developed during that experience, didn't it? You became more intuitive and were even able to see spirits at sometimes. Some.
Yeah, during the 2-year investigation, I became be able to use clairaudience, so I began to hear spirits, which I never had before. And then after those 2 years and a little bit more time, we now currently live in Ohio, and I have actually seen partial spectral figures. It's very odd, but I only seem to see the head and one of the shoulders when I see a spirit. So, yeah, I don't, maybe over time I'll start to see more and more. I have no idea, but yeah, it definitely, being around it so much has, and of course being around Tonya and our 19-year-old daughter, who's also a psychic
That's right.
medium.
She's sensitive, and
Yeah.
not to spend too much more time on it, but I know that when you guys got married, you were having paranormal experiences. I even got to spend a weekend in the haunted holler in West Virginia one time. Of course, I didn't see anything except some very interesting photographs that you had of some strange things that took place there.
Yeah. So I mean, pretty much every house, well, not every, maybe there were, no, maybe just the first apartment that we lived in. Every place after
Yeah.
that we've lived in, we've had experiences. But yeah, the holler, lots of experiences there. Everything from lights in the sky to what felt like fairy lights, fairy energy, interdimensionals, portals, you name it. It was in the holler house.
Yeah, Steve, we're going to give you an exclusive right now.
Okay.
I just realized something. It began after Jolie was born.
Ah,
Prior to that, no. And she's a very powerful psychic medium and has been since she was very, very little. And think about it, babe. Not to put you on the spot on the air here, but it was after Jolie was born that really the houses and all of that.
Yeah,
That's really where it began.
definitely started in Brick, New Jersey.
Right, with
When
the
she
physical
was,
phenomena with the
yeah,
little ball, and she would
yeah.
see the figures. And yeah, I really think that she plays into this in a much bigger way than we ever. So there you go. That's
Yeah.
pretty good for the high strangeness factor.
how about that? Yeah,
Yeah, I really think that that's true. It
that may
aligns.
well be have a connection.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So I think it's really, us as a trio that when we get together, because the book is just full. Jolie wouldn't come to the web a lot on the investigations. We did, to segue into that, we did 75 investigations of that building. And Jolie came maybe in less than 10% of them, but
Right.
they were always very, very lively nights when she was there, sometimes so much so that she wouldn't come back for months at a time.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
always wondered if I had ever stepped into the web, if what I might have experienced. Just one other quick question about the thing that went across the road that occurs to me before, and then we're going to get into the web library. Tonya, I just wonder if, as a sensitive, have you ever gleaned anything else from that experience? Uh, any intuitions about what that might have been, or how that might have, what that might have related to?
The only intuition that I've ever really, I come to the same conclusion, I guess is what I'm trying to say every time, is that it was somehow meant to be as a means for us to connect with the people we subsequently connected with. The Frick brothers, you, Rosemary. It was actually one of those pivotal moments in your life where you can look back and go, my life would look so much different right now if this wouldn't have happened. And that's really because of the people that we then met as a result of it.
So as strange as it was, and as odd as it was, and as difficult it is to put it into any kind of paranormal category, this was a positive.
It was absolutely a positive. Yeah.
And I agree with Tanya 100%. And John Frick has said that all the time. Um, over the course of the past 10 years, just at random times at a dinner, or we get out of the car and give each other a hug because we haven't seen each other in 6 months. Go, I really think what you saw brought us all together. And there have been times, Steve, that reality TV shows have called us to hear our story, and our story does not play into the prevailing paradigm that these things are evil and bad things happen to you. I mean, if you really think about Point Pleasant and the Mothman, there's a good portion of people who said that this was a portent of ill omen, that these figures, that these winged cryptids, Garudas, things like that, would appear before a disaster happened.
Right.
And really, our experience with what we saw is we really believe that to do the work that we needed to do, that we were meant to do, that we needed a certain group of people around us, and you're one of those people. And this experience brought us all together, and that was the function of it. That's why we were, I'm going to put it in air quotes, which does radio listeners absolutely no good, but that's it was meant to be. That's why we were allowed to see it.
That's a great message because so many people are, would have very strange experiences, immediately will try to put it in a negative category when perhaps there's nothing negative about it at all.
Right.
Absolutely. It's the same way with Ghost, particularly when we were investigating the web. And people would always say, "Oh my gosh, aren't you, oh, aren't you terrified?" And many of the spirits that we encountered in the web were not only friendly, they were quite fun to hang out with. So it was a really
Yes, there
positive
were some
thing.
real personalities there.
There
Uh,
were.
Oh yeah, in every sense of the word. Yep.
wasn't there a doctor that gave you some medical advice, Joey? Did I read that right?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Tanya talk about Dr. Thompson because they had quite the relationship.
Right. So just to kind of fill the listeners in, Joey and I had been invited. We were living in North Carolina. We had been invited to lead some tours that had been happening at this local library in Morehead City, North Carolina. The library is called the Webb Memorial Library. And so we would bring groups of people into the library, take them through, room for room, and everybody would have equipment, and we would basically do these group investigations in the library. We were able to do this for 2 years. But before we began bringing groups in there, we wanted to get a sense of the location for ourselves. And the first night that we were there, I encountered a gentleman in one of the rooms, and subsequently developed a relationship with this gentleman. We got his name. I was able to do some research, and we found out that he was one of the two doctors who originally practiced in the building. When the building first opened, it wasn't a library. It was doctors' offices on the first floor, and it was a garment factory on the second floor. So we did some historical research. We were able to figure out who this gentleman was, and from there, I was able to develop a really fun, wonderful relationship with him. He would be there almost every night, not every single night, but almost every night he would be there. And he would often give either medical advice or just practical advice to people who were in the group. So what he would normally do, I would always see him standing in the same location. I would describe to the guests what he looked like, and he would generally point someone out to me. He and I had a interesting way of communicating. It was kind of part telepathy, part charades, part he would just pop pictures into my mind, and so he would point someone out in the group, and I would say, "Okay, Dr. Thompson has a message for you." I'll give you a quick example. On one evening, there was a mom and daughter in the group, and he pointed to this young woman, and he indicated to me that he liked her hair. And so she said, "Oh, yeah, that's nice, thank you, whatever." And then I said, "No, wait a minute. He's saying something," and he put a picture in my mind of her in this pink prom dress. I said, "No, he's saying something about you in a prom dress. I don't know what this is about." And her mom, just her jaw dropped. And she turned to the daughter, and they both looked at me and laughed. And the daughter said, "Oh, yeah, my mom did my hair for prom, and I hated it, and I was upset with her." And I said, "Well, Dr. Thompson's saying your hair looked really nice that night." And she pulls up on her phone a picture of her in the prom dress, and it was exactly the picture that Dr. Thompson had placed into my mind. But there were many, many other instances. One night he got on to some boys. He was shaking his finger at them, and he indicated to me that they had been driving too fast. So I asked him, like, "What is up with this driving too fast? Dr. Thompson's onto you." And their sister started laughing and said that they had been racing around in a golf cart the night before. So
So
there were, oh, go.
not exactly a terrifying spirit then.
He was so fun. He always had fun advice like that. Sometimes he would say, literally, like, "Take two aspirin and call me in the morning." Um, just really fun stuff. Yeah, he was quite a character. He would indicate, like, I'd say, "Hey, Dr. Thompson, haven't seen you the last couple times we were here. Like, where were you?" And he'd say he had been off fishing. He was just fun, lots and lots of fun. And there were several personalities like that in the web.
Now, I know that also that you went in with you have certain investigative techniques that you've developed, and you use a combination of mediumship, and you've had a lot of the groups that have come in there have also included other mediums, beside yourself and Jolie, and also you've used well, I guess for lack of a better term, a spirit box as well. So you're using the sort of the mechanical side and then the intuitive side. How has that served you?
That I think it worked brilliantly. I want to say too that for me, and I think for Jolie, certainly for Joey, for really for all of us, the web was more than just a location for us to investigate. It was really a laboratory for us to develop our psychic abilities. I had seen spirits, and Jolie had too, prior to going into the web, but it was like, for whatever reason, when we were in the web, any ability, and this was the case for people who joined us as guests on investigations, whatever abilities you had were amplified by like 10. So when I was in the web, yeah, I see spirits, but I don't often see them the way that I saw them in the web, if that makes sense. Like completely, like clearly, like total accurate, this is what I'm seeing. You know what I mean? Sometimes I just get more of a sense of things. Um,
It was almost like there was something inherent in the spot or the geography somehow that amplified your abilities.
I think so.
Yeah, that's true. And then to go back to what you were saying, Steve, with the mechanical and the intuitive, there was a third part of it because I like to try and triangulate the data. So if you remember, it was a year ago this past weekend that you came to see us up here in Ohio. Tanya was doing a psychic fair,
That's
and I
right.
had traveled
Yep.
with her. And came, and we coined the term
Oh, yes.
conditional anomalous phenomena. And that's really where our investigative technique comes in. So I really loved it. And of course, it's not possible because the spirits don't always communicate, and energy we just don't understand it enough. But to have clairaudience to hear them or to see them at the same time that the EMF meter is lighting up, or the temperature gauge is dropping significantly, or a voice is coming through the PSB-11, which is my spirit box of choice, and then also to corroborate with historical data. That, to me, that was really where you could move a cap, a conditional anomalous phenomena, into something a little more concrete and say, yeah, there's definitely something going on here. So that's really how we began to develop our investigative technique. And then pulling in quantum physics when it was clear that there was a portal on the second floor. Well, okay, what does that mean, and how do we understand this? And so that's sort of, it really was this 2 years, 75 nights, 150 hours to really cut our teeth and create a technique of investigating that we think serves us very well and could be a good model for other people with further development.
So you think part of now there's no question that the web library was kind of unique with the level of activity. And you think a lot of that had to do with what you would term as a portal?
We do believe so. So on the second floor, Tanya, you want to explain the architecture and feng shui a little?
Sure. So on the second floor, there's a hallway, and on one end of the hallway, there are doors, like most hallways have, leading into other rooms. But on the other end of the hallway, there's nothing. There are no doors. So it's just sort of this closed, narrow space, which in and of itself is kind of odd. And whenever you would walk down that end of the hallway, people would get nauseous, they would get dizzy, everything would sort of seem off kilter. And we would always pick up through the PSB-11 many, many voices coming through at once. I visually would see just it. I always describe it like this: in the movie Poltergeist, toward the end, when all the spirits are kind of descending down the staircase.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, that's very, very much what it looked like. I called it Grand Central Station for Ghost. It was like this hub, and just ghosts, just people walking through, just like any other kind of hub, I guess. So
So to follow that logically, you wouldn't just be attracting spirits like the doctor that had an office there. You could be attracting spirits from what, just about anywhere.
Just about anywhere. And that was generally, I mean, there were some spirits who were like, I would term like residents of the web. They were pretty much always there, like Dr. Thompson. And then there were spirits we would encounter one time, maybe two times, and then never again. But the other thing I'm forgetting to point out about the hallway is that on either end were windows. And in feng shui, it's believed that you don't want to have feng shui is the Chinese art of arranging things so that the flow of energy is harmonious. And so in feng shui, you don't want to have two reflective surfaces facing each other because it's said to create like a portal. So we feel like those two windows facing each other played a part. But we think that there were some other things about the location of the building itself that actually contributed to the level of activity. For example, it was only a block from a large body of water. Right across the street, there was a radio tower. Actually the entire area, not just the web library, because we did talk with residents who grew up in like within several blocks of
Oh, that
that.
was a good idea.
Yeah, and that whole area is called the Promised Land. And so people who grew up and lived in the Promised Land, like pretty much not across the board unanimously, but quite a lot of those people talked about living in haunted houses when they grew up in that area. So also, right across the street from the web was the first library in the county. I'm sorry, I'm saying library, I mean hospital. The first hospital. And a lot of World War II soldiers were treated in that hospital because U-boats, German U-boats, were shooting or sinking ships off the Carolinas during that time. So there were a lot of burn victims, and they were triaged in the Webb Library, and then they were treated over in that hospital. And then the hospital was converted to a nursing home. And then I think in the 90s, all the nursing home all the nursing home residents were evicted, and it became a hotel, and the hotel is reportedly also very haunted. We never got the opportunity to go in and investigate the hotel, but one of these days we're going to. So anyway, there were a lot of reasons that we felt. Also, the library itself is filled with antiques. There's original books from 1929 from the man who built the building. Many, many factors.
Another thing, another factor about what you guys do, I notice. I mean, your book, Tonya, Living the Intuitive Life, and I know I've known both of you for years. The talk a little bit about the state of mind or the state of consciousness that you use to go into the library. What I'm trying to say is, you guys are so far away from the reality shows where people go in and try and provoke. And so, how does your mental attitude going in serve you when you go on an investigation like this?
Incredibly so. For example, there was, well, this is one of the best examples I can think of. When we first started investigating the library, there was a spirit on the second floor that we called Vincent. We called him Vincent because that's a name that we continued to get, from the PSB 11. And he was nasty. He was quite aggressive. He was just not nice. He used to charge up on me, so I would see him like charge up, and he would scream in my face. I encountered him in a couple of nightmares, so he kind of like followed me home on a couple of occasions. Anyway, not a nice spirit. And what I realized is it felt like his energy was able to be stronger when I was afraid of him. So instead of being afraid, I decided that I would send healing, energy to him, send Reiki to him. I would bring him gifts. I would bring him crystals. I would pray for him. I would talk nicely to him. And it really changed the energy and the way that he was able to interact with me. And I think it's really important for people. Everything is energy. So if you're going into a haunted or active location and you're going in from a place of fear, that's a real low vibrational energy. You're going to attract more things like that. But if you're going in from a place of, feeling confident, feeling protected, a more higher vibrating energy, that's the kind of spirits that you're going to likely attract. So when I was in places in the web and I was feeling a little like nervous or whatever, I just start singing or, telling myself jokes or just being generally silly to kind of raise and elevate the energy.
Uh, Now, there are some, I guess, entities or whatever that you tended to label as interdimensionals. Is that because they didn't really fit any category of, say, like a traditional spirit? Uh, what? Give us a couple examples of what you might have called labeled as an interdimensional in the library.
Right. So there was an interesting confluence of events about a year into our investigation. Vincent was sort of, I don't want to use the word rehabbed, but he sort of was. And there was an interesting artifact. We carry so much responsibility as investigators because we don't know what we're setting in motion. Vincent, even though he was crotchety, and we have a friend who's a trained shaman, and he came into the web with us and said, "Oh, Vincent is he's the grumpy old uncle of the family of spirits that constitute the haunting of the web," and that was very instructive because we've all had grumpy old uncles, and they are not evil, and you handle them certain ways, oftentimes with kindness. Well, when Vincent sort of retreated, sort of all hell broke loose, Steve. So we wound up with this. I call them the horde of angry spirits, and at the opposite end from the portal entrance, they all kind of gathered outside of this kitchen. And at one point, at the end of that summer, a couple months in, Tonya and I seriously talked about shutting the investigation down because it was no longer fun, and it was a little bit dangerous in the fact that people would get very emotional. They felt like they were being watched, they were being touched, people were being cursed at. We were being cursed at and threatened through the PSB 11. And during this whole time, the energy of the whole place changed very much, and it attracted some interdimensionals, two specific ones. One was this hairy kind of creature who Tonya and another woman saw it. So again, it was an independent corroboration, but kind of looked like something out of Where the Wild Things Are. It was fanged. It was hairy. I heard it in the darkness in one of the rooms in that area, kind of like let out. It's kind of like this. Oh, I heard in this darkened room of this thing. An interesting thing is that right after that, within a couple of days, they had to have the library bombed for fleas. But okay, so here's a non-corporeal interdimensional being, kind of is this hairy creature, but yet they had a flea infestation. Now, was it directly related? We don't know, but looking at it logically, people didn't allow pets and things into the library, and here is this hairy creature, and then they have to bomb for fleas. So that's very interesting. The second thing, and I know we're getting relatively short on time,
We got a few minutes yet. Go ahead.
MIBs, right? Men in Black.
Yes.
But interdimensional. They were not corporeal. Tonya saw them. Another medium who Tonya was training, who was with us, saw them and drew them, knowing nothing about MIBs, looked very classic with the fedora and the sort of vaguely sort of Asian features or steppe sort of features.
That is mind blowing. As somebody in the UFO realm that has, and John Keel that has looked at that, that's phenomenal. Go ahead, Joey.
Right. So we consider those interdimensionals, and people can go to MUFON and also to NewFork and go to their databases, and they will see in conjunction with our investigations. One was around October of 2016, and another was around July of 2017, that people filed reports independent of the web, had nothing to do with our investigations, seeing UFOs in that area, maybe what would be considered a half a block from where the portal entrance is in the library. And then going back and looking at NewFork and MUFON, there's probably about another dozen reported instances of UFOs in proximity to the library there. So that's where we say there were interdimensionals. We also saw things that were wraith-like, skeletal things that crawled along the ceiling. Certainly not a ghost, certainly not a spirit.
There's supposed to be something like that at Waverly Hills, which, of course, I went there and didn't see anything, but that's the way it goes. Yeah, fascinating about the Men in Black. And what time frame were we talking about with the UFOs? Did anything happen while in the 2-year investigation, or was this at other times, but just in the same area?
No, two directly correlate to our time investigating there. One was October 1st, 2016. You can find that on the MUFON database, and on the New Fork database, you can find one July 13th, 2017.
Well, we
And,
are.
and
Oh, go,
yeah,
keep going.
go ahead.
We got time. I just want to make sure we get all your good promotions in. But go ahead. We got time.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say our major experience with the MIBs and the interdimensional was in 8 days of that July 13th report on 2017.
Now
So
that's
there's a
fascinating.
definite link that, yeah, right? That you got ghosts and spirits, you got a portal, you have a hairy interdimensional being, and you have spectral MIBs, all within 8 days of each other.
Did anybody else, did any of your visitors see anything you would call interdimensional as well?
Well, that hairy being. So what I would do when I was on investigations, I would never mention to anybody what I was seeing during the course of the investigation. I might afterward, but the reason I didn't do it during the investigation is, like I said, a lot of people's abilities were amplified. So I was always waiting to see if anyone would say that they were seeing what I was seeing. So I'm looking at this creature, and as Joey said, it looks like something right out of a Murray Sendak book. It didn't make any kind of sense to me. I had no idea what it could be. So I decided I wouldn't, I didn't even know that I believed what I was seeing. And this woman turned to me and said, "Do you see that?" And I said, "See what?" And she described exactly what I was seeing, this hairy, fanged, interdimensional kind of being. So yeah, and that happened quite frequently.
And you had so many different instances. We'll have to do this again on the web library, and I hope you guys will be regular, reoccurring guests. But
We'd love
Thank
to.
you. We'd love to. Call on us at any time.
I will. But it's interesting that you had so many correlations and so many things confirmed by other people and so forth. But please tell us all about your websites and where we can reach you and all the things you're doing.
You can find us on Facebook. My Facebook page, my professional Facebook page is Tonya Madia, RYT, RMT, LMT, and those are just letters for things that I do. So you can find me there, and you can find Joey on Facebook as well.
Right. You can also get a look at my work and what I'm doing at newmystics.com /Joey. And you can also find me on Twitter and LinkedIn and, most of the social media, Instagram.
Yeah.
We keep people up to date on what's going on and what we're doing.
And
if you go to Amazon and check out your books, or go to directly, I think, to Visionary Living, can you get them directly?
Yes, sure can.
And Joey and I are in the process, the early stages of writing a book, collaborating for Visionary Living as well. No title at this moment. And anything else? I think I cut you off there, Tonya. Was there something else you wanted to promote?
No, well, you said exactly what I was getting ready to say. Books
Okay.
are still on Amazon.
Steve, last thing that I want to say
Sure.
real quick is that the weekend of May 17th, so the 18th, 19th, we're going to be at the first Waynesburg Paranormal Conference. We'll be presenting. We hope to see people there, Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. We're real excited about that. And the week prior, George Norrie is going to be presenting in, I believe, Cleveland or Columbus, hon. And we'll be at that event on May 11th.
Oh, that's cool.
So it'd be a great opportunity for people to meet with us and talk to us. And, we go to the Mothman Festival every year.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be there, of course, doing my tour guide, and we'll get into that another time. But
Cool.
I really appreciate you guys being here. You guys are always fascinating, and I encourage people to check out your books, Living the Intuitive Life and Watch Out for the Hallway. Fascinating books. Now, guys, sit tight. I'm going to do my little closeout here, and we'll talk a little bit afterwards.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Steve.
you,
All right.
Steve.
And again, I'm going to thank my phenomenal guests, Joey and Tonya Madia, and I'm looking forward to your return. I also need to thank Irene Ellen Block and Mark Johnson. They are our fearless leaders here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Also, my sometimes co-host, Andy Mercer, who you will be seeing very shortly in some of the upcoming episodes. He is also my full-time producer. The music was by Brian Zeller. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here on the High Strangeness Factor, a displaced Yank here on Paranormal UK Radio. Thanks for listening. I will see you all in a fortnight. Take care.